Mama Ife's Dark Pot, A Tale of Blood and Shadows. We always thought Mama Ife was just an old woman who lived on the edge of the village, minding her business and cooking her famous banga soup. But little did we know, that pot of hers held something darker than palm oil and spices. It held secrets that no one could imagine, and the taste of it was not from the sweetness of the oil but from the blood she stirred deep in the night. The first sign came when the children started disappearing, one by one, without a trace. At first, it was easy to explain. Maybe they wandered too far into the forest, maybe wild animals took them, or perhaps bad spirits were responsible. But deep down, the villagers began to feel that something else was at play. Something much closer to home. It was late during the planting season when the first child disappeared. His name was Kin, a small boy with wide eyes and quick feet, always running after birds and butterflies. He was last seen playing near the river, his laughter echoing through the trees. When his mother called for him to come home, there was no answer. Only the silence of the riverbank greeted her. They searched the forest for days, but Kin was never found. The village mourned, but after a while, life moved on. People spoke of how careless children could be, how it was a lesson for others not to wander too far. But just when the wound of Kin's disappearance began to heal, another child went missing. This time, it was Amora, the youngest daughter of the chief's wife. Amora had been helping her mother in the field when she disappeared. Her mother turned around for just a moment to gather some firewood, and when she looked back, Amora was gone. The village was thrown into chaos. 2 children missing within a month, something was terribly wrong. People began to whisper of curses, bad omens, and evil spirits lurking in the shadows. But there was one thing they hadn't noticed yet, one small detail that would come back to haunt them later. After each child went missing, Mama Ife's house would fill with the rich aroma of her famous banga soup. The scent would drift through the village, making everyone hungry, even those grieving the loss of their children. Mama Ife, with her quiet voice and wrinkled face, would offer bowls of her soup to the families. "Eat, my children," she would say softly. "It will ease your pain." And they ate. They ate her soup with tears in their eyes, grateful for the comfort she seemed to bring. But the comfort was laced with darkness, and they didn't know it. Months passed, and more children vanished, 3, then 4. The villagers could no longer ignore the signs. They called on the elders, who sat in a circle under the ancient baobab tree, discussing what could be causing this evil in their village. The priest was summoned to perform cleansing rituals, pouring libation at the river, asking the gods for protection. But nothing worked. One evening, when the sun was setting, and the village was bathed in a golden glow, Neka, a young woman known for her sharp eyes, saw something that chilled her blood. She was fetching water from the stream when she noticed a trail of small footprints leading from the edge of the forest to Mama Ife's house. At first, she thought nothing of it, perhaps a child had gone to visit the old woman. But as she drew closer, she noticed the footprints seemed to disappear right at Mama Ife's door. Neka hesitated but decided to follow her curiosity. She crept around the side of Mama Ife's house, careful not to make a sound. Through a small crack in the wooden wall, she peered inside. What she saw made her heart stop. Mama Ife stood over her large black pot, stirring something thick and red. The smell of banga soup was strong, but this time it wasn't the comforting aroma that made people's mouths water. It was different, sharper, and more metallic. Neka watched as Mama Ife raised a ladle to her lips, tasting the red liquid, her eyes glowing in the dim light of the fire. Neka's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled backward, nearly dropping her water jar. She didn't dare to stay any longer. She ran back to the village, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind racing with the images of what she had seen. Neka knew she had to tell someone. She couldn't keep this to herself. That night, she went to her father, one of the elders, and told him everything. At first, he didn't believe her. How could sweet old Mama Ife, the woman who had cooked for their families for years, be involved in something so dark? But Nneka insisted. Her father's face grew serious, and he promised to gather the elders to discuss what she had seen. The next morning, the elders met in secret. They debated what to do. Accusing Mama Ife without proof could bring shame and trouble to the village. But they also couldn't ignore the growing number of children who had gone missing, nor the strange coincidences that surrounded Mama Ife's house. It was decided that a few of the men would go to Mama Ife's house that night to investigate. If Nneka was right, they would confront her. If she was wrong, they would have to find another explanation for the disappearances. The night was dark, the moon hidden behind thick clouds, casting the village in shadow. A group of men, led by Nneka's father, crept towards Mama Ife's house. They carried no torches, for fear of alerting her. When they reached her door, they could hear the faint sound of bubbling soup and the soft humming of the old woman inside. Slowly, they pushed the door open. What they saw made their blood run cold. Mama Ife stood over her pot, just as Nneka had described. The thick red soup swirled inside, steam rising from it in ghostly tendrils. But what shocked them most was what lay beside the pot, a small pile of bones, too small to belong to any animal. One of the men gasped, and Mama Ife turned to face them. Her eyes, once soft and kind, were now dark and hollow. Her smile stretched too wide across her face, her teeth sharp in the firelight. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice low and menacing. "You don't understand." The men froze, unsure of what to do. They had come prepared to confront an old woman, but what stood before them was something else entirely. Something evil. Nneka's father stepped forward, his voice shaking. "What have you done, Mama Ife? What is this madness?" Mama Ife laughed, a sound that chilled them to the bone. "Madness? No, this is power. The power to live forever. The children, they were sacrifices. Their blood feeds me, keeps me strong." The men recoiled in horror. They had heard stories of witches and dark magic, but they had never believed it could happen in their own village. But here it was, right before their eyes. One of the men, unable to bear the sight any longer, lunged forward, knocking the pot over. The thick red soup spilled across the floor, splashing against the walls. The smell of blood filled the room, overpowering them. Mama Ife screamed, her face contorting with rage. "You fools! You've ruined everything." But the men didn't stop. They grabbed her, dragging her out of the house and into the village square. By now, people had gathered, drawn by the commotion. They watched in shock as the elders dragged Mama Ife to the center of the village, her hands bound, her face twisted in fury. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel Miss Folktales TV, where you hear all sorts of Africa story. Please kindly click the subscribe button now and get notified whenever there is a new story. Thanks. The village gathered quickly, murmurs spreading like wildfire as the men dragged Mama Ife to the center of the village square. People stared, wide-eyed, unable to believe that the quiet, old woman they had known all their lives could be capable of such horrors. Mothers clutched their children tightly, and fathers stood protectively by their sides. The air was thick with fear and uncertainty. The elders formed a circle around Mama Ife, their faces grim. The chief, a tall man with a broad chest and a deep voice, stepped forward. "Mama Ife," he began, his voice steady but filled with sorrow, "you have been accused of dark magic, of taking the lives of our children to feed your wicked desires. What do you have to say for yourself?" Mama Ife's face remained twisted in anger, but her voice was calm, almost mocking. "You simpletons," she hissed, "you do not understand the power I possess. I have lived longer than any of you can imagine, and I will continue to live long after you are dust. Your children's lives were a small price to pay for immortality." Gasps echoed through the crowd, and whispers of witch and evil filled the air. The villagers looked to the elders, waiting for them to speak, to take action. Neka, who stood with her family, couldn't believe her eyes. She had always known something was off about Mama Ife, but never in her wildest dreams did she imagine this. The chief took a deep breath, his eyes darkening with resolve. You may have fooled us for a long time, but no more. Tonight, you will face the consequences of your actions. The villagers began to murmur, unsure of what the chief meant. There was no formal punishment for witchcraft in their village. Such things were considered myths and stories told to scare children. But now, faced with the reality of what Mama Ife had done, they realized that something had to be done to rid their village of her evil once and for all. As the chief stepped back, the priest, an old man with a deep connection to the spiritual world, stepped forward. He held in his hands a bundle of sacred herbs and a small clay bowl filled with white chalk. He began to chant, his voice low and rhythmic, calling upon the gods to cleanse the village of the evil that had taken root. The villagers watched in silence as the priest circled Mama Ife, sprinkling the chalk in a wide circle around her. The white powder glowed faintly in the moonlight, creating a barrier between her and the rest of the village. Mama Ife stood still, her eyes fixed on the ground, but her lips curled into a wicked smile. You think your little rituals can stop me, she sneered. I have lived through countless rituals, countless attempts to destroy me. You are nothing. But the priest continued, unfazed by her words. His chanting grew louder, the power of his voice rising with each word. The wind began to pick up, swirling around the village square, lifting the dust and leaves into the air. The flames of the nearby torches flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows across the crowd. Then, without warning, the priest threw the sacred herbs into the fire. A bright flash of light erupted from the flames, followed by a thick, dark smoke that filled the air. The villagers covered their mouths and noses, trying to avoid breathing it in. The smoke swirled toward Mama Ife, wrapping around her like a snake, tightening its grip with every passing second. Mama Ife's eyes widened in fear for the first time. She struggled against the smoke, trying to break free, but it was no use. The power of the ritual was stronger than she had anticipated. The ground beneath her began to tremble, and cracks appeared at her feet, as if the earth itself was trying to swallow her whole. No, she screamed, her voice filled with rage and desperation. You cannot do this to me. I am eternal. But the priest's chanting continued, unrelenting. The cracks in the earth widened, and with one final, ear-splitting scream, Mama Ife was pulled into the ground. The villagers watched in horror and relief as her body disappeared into the darkness, leaving nothing but the faint smell of smoke and blood behind. For a long moment, no one moved. The village square was eerily silent, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the distant cries of night birds. Slowly, the villagers began to realize that it was over. Mama Ife was gone, taken by the very earth she had cursed with her evil. The chief turned to the crowd, his face pale but resolute. It is done, he said quietly. The witch is gone. Our village is safe once more. But the relief that swept through the village was bittersweet. The children who had been taken by Mama Ife would never return, and their families would forever carry the scars of her dark magic. The villagers knew that, though they had defeated the evil that had plagued them, they could never truly forget the horrors they had endured. Neka stood in the crowd, her heart heavy with sorrow but also with pride. She had been the one to uncover Mama Ife's dark secret, to save her village from further destruction. But she would never forget the sight of the old woman standing over her pot, stirring the blood of innocent children. It was an image that would haunt her for the rest of her life. In the weeks that followed, the village tried to return to normal. The elders declared that no one would speak of Mama Ife again, that her name would be erased from their history, along with the memory of her dark deeds. But stories have a way of surviving, even when people try to bury them. Whispers of Mama Ife's curse spread to other villages, carried by travelers and traders. Some said that her spirit still wandered the forest at night, searching for a new pot to stir, a new village to terrorize. Others believed that the priest's ritual had truly banished her, that she was gone forever. But deep in the forest, where Mama Ife's house had once stood, the trees still grew a little darker, the air a little colder. And on certain nights, if you stood very still, you could hear the faint sound of a pot bubbling over a fire, the smell of blood mingling with the smoke. The villagers stayed away from that part of the forest, just in case. Months passed, and the village slowly healed from the trauma of Mama Ife's reign of terror. The children who had lost their lives were remembered with ceremonies, their names spoken with love and sadness. The elders worked to restore the village's faith, bringing in new traditions to replace the darkness that had threatened to engulf them. Yet, as time went on, the shadow of Mama Ife's legacy began to creep back into their lives. Farmers reported their crops failing without reason, animals grew sick, and the nights became filled with unsettling noises. A sense of unease settled over the village, like a heavy fog that wouldn't lift. Neka, now a young woman, felt the weight of it all. She remembered the terror of that night when they had confronted Mama Ife and the strange rituals that followed. It had been so easy to believe they had banished the evil for good. But as her grandmother used to say, evil is like a seed, it only takes a crack in the soil to grow. One evening, as Neka walked home from the market, she heard a low, haunting melody drifting through the air. It was familiar yet foreign, tugging at her heart. She followed the sound, her curiosity piquing despite the warnings echoing in her mind. As she moved deeper into the woods, the air became thick with tension. Shadows danced around her, and the melody grew louder, transforming into a sorrowful wail. She stepped into a clearing and froze. There stood an old woman, her back turned. The long, white hair flowed down her back like a river of silver. Neka's heart raced. She knew this figure, the resemblance to Mama Ife was unmistakable. "Who are you?" Neka called out, her voice trembling. The old woman turned slowly, revealing a face lined with wrinkles, eyes glinting with a knowledge that sent chills down Neka's spine. "I am she who stirs the pot of fate," the woman replied, her voice soft yet commanding. "I have returned." Neka's instincts screamed at her to flee, but she stood her ground. "You cannot be Mama Ife. We banished you." The old woman laughed softly, a sound that echoed through the trees. "You think you can rid the world of evil by mere words and rituals? I have lived long before your village was built and will continue long after you are gone." Neka felt the ground beneath her shift, the trees bending closer, as if listening intently to the conversation. "Why are you here?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am here for what is mine," Mama Ife replied, stepping closer. "The blood I spilled was only the beginning. I need more to regain my power." Neka's heart raced, and she glanced back toward the village. "You will not take anyone else," she said, her voice firm. "We will fight you again." Mama Ife's laughter filled the air, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Neka's spine. "You think you are strong, little girl? You know nothing of the darkness that dwells within me. I will rise, and when I do, all will tremble before me." Neka raced back to the village, her mind racing with fear and confusion. How could Mama Ife have returned? Had they truly defeated her? That night, Neka gathered the villagers in the square. The air was thick with anxiety as she recounted her encounter with the old witch. The elders listened, their faces grim. "We thought we had banished her," one elder muttered, shaking his head. "But evil can never be truly defeated. It only lies in wait." The chief's expression was grave. "We must prepare. We cannot let fear guide our actions, but we cannot ignore this warning. We must gather our strength, learn more about her dark magic, and find a way to stop her once and for all." Neka felt a flicker of hope. They had faced darkness before, they could do it again. But as the villagers talked and planned, she couldn't shake the feeling that Mama Ife was already among them, lurking just out of sight. The next few days were filled with tension. The villagers worked together, collecting herbs, learning old rituals from the elders, and sharing stories of their experiences. The nights grew colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer. Each evening, Neka would walk to the edge of the forest, hoping to catch a glimpse of the old witch. But Mama Ife never showed herself again. It was as if she had vanished into the night, waiting for the right moment to strike. In an attempt to lift the village's spirits, the elders decided to hold the Festival of Light, a celebration that would honor the spirits of the children lost and bring hope to the living. Lanterns were crafted from palm fronds, filled with oil and wicks, ready to be lit on the night of the festival. On the evening of the festival, the village square came alive with music, laughter, and the delicious aroma of traditional foods. Children played while the elders danced, and the glow of lanterns filled the air with a warm light. But Neka could not shake the feeling of dread. She kept glancing toward the dark forest, half expecting to see Mama Ife emerge from the shadows. As the night wore on, the villagers sang songs of hope, but the joy felt hollow to Neka. Then, as the lanterns were lit, a strange wind blew through the village, extinguishing the flames. Gasps erupted from the crowd, and the air grew thick with an unnatural chill. Mama Ife, someone shouted, fear echoing in their voice. The villagers looked around, panic spreading as they realized the witch was among them. Suddenly, the lanterns flickered back to life, illuminating a figure standing at the edge of the square. It was Mama Ife, her long hair flowing in the wind, her eyes glowing with malevolence. "Did you think you could forget me?" she sneered, her voice dripping with malice. "I have come to reclaim what is mine." Neka felt the weight of the villagers' fear pressing down on her, but she stepped forward. "You have no power here, Mama Ife. We are not afraid of you." The old witch laughed, a sound that sent shivers through the crowd. "Fear is the source of my power, little girl. And tonight, I will show you just how powerful I can be." With a wave of her hand, the ground trembled, and the villagers fell to their knees. Darkness engulfed the square, swirling around them like a storm. The lanterns flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows across the terrified faces of the villagers. Neka fought against the darkness, calling upon the strength of her ancestors. "We will not let you take us," she shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. "We stand together against your evil." As Neka spoke, a light began to glow from within her, brightening the darkness around her. The villagers looked up, seeing the light and feeling a surge of hope. One by one, they rose to their feet, standing beside Neka. Together, the chief shouted, raising his staff high, "We are stronger than your darkness, Mama Ife." The villagers joined hands, forming a circle around Neka. They began to chant, their voices rising in unison, drowning out the witch's laughter. The power of their unity grew stronger, pushing back against the darkness that surrounded them. Mama Ife's expression twisted in rage. "You think your little chants can stop me? I will show you the true meaning of fear." With a wave of her hand, she conjured shadows that lashed out at the villagers, trying to break their bond. But the light from Neka and the villagers shone brighter, repelling the darkness. As the battle raged on, Neka felt a deep connection to her ancestors, their spirits guiding her. She stepped forward, channeling their strength. "You are not our fate," she cried. "You will not take our children." The darkness roared, swirling violently, but Neka's light cut through it. The shadows shrieked, fading back into the trees. Mama Ife's face contorted in fury as she realized her power was waning. "No," she screamed, her voice filled with desperation. "I am eternal." But Neka's light grew brighter, pushing back against the shadows. The villagers pressed forward, their hands still joined, chanting with all their might. The power of their unity became a force to be reckoned with, and Mama Ife's form began to dissolve, fading into the night. "Your evil ends here," Nneka shouted, and with one final burst of energy, she unleashed the light within her. It surged forward, consuming the darkness completely. When the light faded, the village square was quiet. The villagers stood together, breathing heavily but relieved. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. Nneka looked around, seeing the faces of her friends and family, each one filled with disbelief and hope. They had done it. They had defeated Mama Ife once and for all. As the dawn broke over the village, the first rays of sunlight kissed the earth. The villagers gathered together, their hearts filled with gratitude. They had stood together, faced the darkness, and won. The sun rose higher, bathing the village in a warm golden glow. Birds sang joyfully, as if celebrating the victory over darkness. But as the villagers began to clean up after the festival, Nneka felt a stirring in her heart. She knew the battle against evil would never truly end. It was a cycle that would continue for generations. The elders gathered around Nneka, their faces filled with pride. "You led us with courage," the chief said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You showed us the power of unity and love. We will tell your story for years to come." Nneka smiled, but the weight of the responsibility settled on her shoulders. "It's not just my story," she replied. "It's all of ours. We must always remember what we faced and be ready to protect our village." In the days that followed, the village came together to honor the spirits of the children they had lost. They built a shrine at the edge of the forest, a place of remembrance where villagers could come to pay their respects. Flowers bloomed around the shrine, a symbol of life emerging from the darkness. The village also adopted new traditions, focusing on unity and strength. Every month, they held gatherings to share stories, perform dances, and strengthen their bonds. Nneka often led these gatherings, sharing tales of bravery and hope, reminding everyone of the power they held when they stood together. But as life continued, whispers began to circulate among the villagers. They spoke of strange occurrences in the forest. Some claimed to have seen shadows moving between the trees, while others heard eerie sounds at night. Nneka listened to their fears but reminded them of the light they had created together. "We have faced darkness and won," she said during one of the gatherings. "We must not let fear control us. We are stronger than any shadows that may linger." One evening, as Nneka prepared for the monthly gathering, a strong wind swept through the village, causing the lanterns to flicker ominously. The air grew thick with tension as villagers began to murmur about the sounds they had heard in the night. "Something is out there," one villager insisted, eyes wide with fear. "I swear I saw something watching me from the trees." Nneka felt a chill run down her spine. She knew they had defeated Mama Ife, but what if something else had taken her place? Determined to face whatever it was, Nneka called for a meeting that night, inviting everyone to come together once more. As the villagers gathered, the wind howled, creating an unsettling atmosphere. "Tonight, we stand together again," Nneka declared, her voice steady. "We will confront the shadows that may linger in the forest. If we work together, we can face anything that comes our way." The villagers nodded, a sense of solidarity replacing their fear. They lit lanterns and walked to the edge of the forest, where the darkness loomed, threatening to swallow them whole. As they approached, Nneka noticed a flickering light deep within the trees. "What is that?" she whispered, feeling a mix of curiosity and dread. The villagers exchanged nervous glances but pressed on. The closer they got, the clearer the light became, illuminating a circle of ancient stones. At the center of the circle stood a figure cloaked in shadows, its form shifting and changing, as if made of smoke. "Welcome, children of the light," it intoned, its voice smooth yet chilling. Nneka stepped forward, refusing to let fear take hold. "Who are you?" she demanded, her heart racing. I am the keeper of shadows, it replied, its eyes glinting like stars in the dark. I am here to reclaim what you took from me. What do you want? Neka asked, feeling the weight of the villagers' eyes on her. Balance, the keeper said simply. You have driven away the darkness, but in doing so, you have upset the natural order. I have come to restore it. Neka's mind raced. We defeated Mama Ife. We will not allow you to bring her back. The keeper laughed softly, a sound that echoed through the forest. You misunderstand, child. I am not here to bring her back. I am here to remind you that darkness and light must coexist. Without one, the other cannot exist. As the keeper spoke, shadows danced around the villagers, twisting and turning like living beings. Neka felt their presence, an ancient power that made the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. Do you fear me? The keeper asked, tilting its head. You have faced worse, yet you stand strong. You are the light that defies the dark. Neka felt the tension in the air shift. We don't fear you, but we will not allow you to harm our village. The keeper regarded her with interest. Then let us dance, light and shadow. Let us see if you can hold on to your light in the face of darkness. Hello, now you have enjoyed part 1 of the story. Why don't you just click the subscribe button and let me know at the comment section if you would love to hear the second part. Please give me more motivation and pleasure to do more story by clicking the subscribe button on the notification bell and let me know on the comment section if you need part 2 to come. Thanks.